Hey, everybody, we're about 5 minutes out from this thing starting. I'm so glad to have you here today. We are going to have Angie Jones helping us out here and hosting or being a guest host today. I'm very excited about this. So thank you very much for being here. Once again, in about 5 minutes, we'll get going. And just hang out for a couple more minutes as people join in. Thank you very much. If you're just joining us, we got about 3 minutes until 1 o'clock. I'm going to start right at 1 o'clock, and Angie will be on the line shortly after that. So thank you for being here. Hold on for just another couple minutes, and we'll get going. Thanks very much. All right, so welcome. My name is Paul Merrill. I'm the CEO and founder of Beaufort Fairmont Automated Testing Services. We work with teams to help sync up dev and testing in agile environments, and we help teams to automate regression testing. We do that through 3 different ways. One is consulting, one is training, and another is managed services. So if you have test automation needs, we're the right people to come to. Today I'm very excited to have Angie Jones as our first guest host. We've been doing these webinars for a little over a year now. I've done all of them up to this point. Today Angie's going to join us, and Angie's a good friend of mine. I just love her to death. I'm so happy that she could do this. Her content is always terrific. And today she's going to be talking about applying the pillars of object-oriented programming to test automation design, which is exciting because I tend to be very much an object-oriented type of person. I tend to think that way and do things that way, so very excited to hear what she has to say about it. Note her Twitter handle is here, techgirl1908, and make sure to tweet during this, either about her or this or me or whatever, or Beaufort Fairmont. We love hearing the conversation online, and we love joining you online for all of that. So we got a couple things to go through here first before we get started, but I will be as short as I can on these. Upcoming events, I'll be at Star Canada next week. So if you're out there, please drop me a line, paul@beaufortfairmont.com or dpaulmerrill on Twitter, or through the website. There's a contact form on there as well for Beaufort Fairmont. But I look forward to it. I'm going to be talking about machine learning and testing. I did a talk very similar to this out at Star West last week, and it went really well. In fact, I had two of the folks that I quote in that material, Jason Arbin and Moshe Millman, out there as part of the attendees, and they contributed to the conversation very nicely. Also had Terry King out there for that as well. So that was just awesome to have those folks in attendance. Next webinar is going to be 11/13, so that's a Monday, the 13th of November at 1 p.m. So mark your calendars. You can always find those on beaufortfairmont.com/webinars, or go to the website and click on webinars, or just ping me if you want me to tell you when the next one is. But lots of ways to find out about that. We'll also have one of the big things that I'm really excited about is I'm co-chairing the TISCA 2018 conference in Chapel Hill. This Chapel Hill, if you don't know, is part of the Research Triangle. It's right near here. I'm in Cary. It's near Raleigh, Durham, all of this area. It's a great conference. We have some of the best speakers out there. Just Google TISCA 2018. Angie will be there. I'll be there. Bob Galen will be there. Mary Thorne, Ken Pugh. We have a lot of really great names coming out to speak there, and the cost is really, really low. The price is very low, but the content is very, very high. I'm excited about that. It's going to be lots of fun. Just some terrific speakers. I'm very much looking forward to that, so make sure to join us in North Carolina for that if you can make the trip. So we are having Angie Jones on today as our guest host, and you've seen her information. I want to introduce her very, very briefly here. I'm going to turn off my screen share and start sharing hers in just a minute. But Angie's a fixture in the test community, and I'll have her bio here in just a second. We're also going to be doing a $50 Amazon card giveaway today. So hang around until the end of the webinar, and I will be picking someone to give this Amazon gift card to. So hang out, enjoy this. Make sure as we're going along that when you have questions for Angie, that you type them into the questions section on the GoToWebinar control panel right here in front of you. Hopefully you have all that. You all have that in front of you. You can raise your hand and I'll try to find you. We're going to take breaks as we go along. Angie will take breaks for questions. So as those questions come up, type them in so that we're ready when she has a break. Once again, I'm very excited to have all of you here, and I'm going to start changing the presenter here, and I will introduce Angie in just a moment as I do this. If I can find her here. Where did she go? There she is, Angie. Great. Great. And I'm going to turn off my screen share too here somewhere. Angie, are you there? Or are you still on?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yes. Thanks so much for being here today. Let me, I'm going to introduce you here. I have your bio. Okay, so Angie Jones is a consulting automation engineer who advises several Scrum teams on automation strategies and has developed automation frameworks for countless software products. As a master inventor, she is known for her innovative and out-of-the-box thinking style, which has resulted in more than 20 patented inventions in the US and China. Angie shares her wealth of knowledge internationally by speaking and teaching at software conferences, serving as an adjunct college professor of computer programming, and leading tech workshops for young girls through Tech Girls and Black Girls Code. Angie, thanks so much for being here, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yay. Can you see me, Paul?
I muted myself, sorry. I cannot see you. If you want to share your webcam, you're welcome to.
Let's see.
And if
Share
you don't,
my
that's
web.
fine too. There we go, yeah.
All right.
There we go, thank you very much.
Back it up a little bit.
All right, and off we go.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Paul, for having me. My background is not as cool as Paul's background, but hey. So, yeah, today I'm going to be discussing the pillars of object-oriented programming and specifically how can we apply this to test automation design. So I am a senior automation engineer at Twitter, and I'm based out of San Francisco, California. My blog is angiejones.tech, so I blog about automation techniques and strategies on that blog. So if you are in automation, you should probably subscribe to there. So I have content is not overwhelming, like I don't send stuff very often, but as I put out new content, I do email that blast to let everyone know. And then as Paul said, I am on Twitter at TechGirl1908. So you can tweet me. My DMs are open if you ever have questions regarding automation or anything like that. Feel free to reach out to me. As I go through this, again, as Paul said, we will take little short breaks in between the concepts to allow for your questions. So if you think of a question, just go ahead and type it as soon as you think about it so that when it's time for questions, we can just dig through those and pull yours out, okay? All right, let's get started. Okay, this thing is goofy. Let's see. All right, here we go. All right, so I used to teach Java programming at the college level for several years, up until very recently, until May when I moved to San Francisco. And in teaching this, I would tell my students about the core concepts of object-oriented programming. And they were able to grasp this, and they were even able to apply it to really simple exercises. Now, I also uh, interview developers and automation candidates, and I work with them as well. So I do code reviews and things like that. And what I've noticed is there's really a gap between what we learn in academia and how we apply that to big enterprise type applications. And so people struggle to take those concepts that they understand in theory and be able to implement them in practice. So what we're going to go through today is those theories, those pillars of object-oriented programming, and specifically how do we apply those to test automation design. Okay? So the four main pillars of object-oriented programming are encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction. I'm going to go through each one of these. I know that some of you on the call may already be familiar with these in theory. However, because there may be some people who aren't, I am still going to give you a refresher and give them an intro on these concepts, and then I'll explain how to apply each one of them to automation. So let's start with encapsulation. So encapsulation is basically a concept to hide data and bind that data to public methods that other classes can utilize to access the data. So the reason you want to do that is to protect the data's integrity. You don't want external methods directly accessing your data and changing it. You want them to go through the public methods that your class provides and has more control over. So if we look at a very simple example, this is a class, and by the way, the examples are going to be in Java, but these concepts apply to any object-oriented programming language. Okay, so this class, very simple. It has some data here. A person has a name, an age, and a gender. And if we wanted to encapsulate that data, it's very simple to do. What you would do is make the data itself private. So you see on these 3 lines, we've made the data private. And then you have public methods that can access that data. So I have a getters and setters for each one of these. So this is a very basic example of encapsulation, very straightforward. Most people can grasp this concept. Now let's look at our application under test. Today we're going to be looking at the Twitter app, and this is the Beaufort Fairmont page. So let's look at this. And if we wanted to take this and basically do automation design for this, some people might struggle to say, okay, how do I take that concept of encapsulation that we just talked about and apply it to this? Well, fortunately, there is already a very popular design pattern called the page object model design pattern. If you're in automation, then you're probably familiar with this pattern. If not, let me briefly explain it. So the way it works is for every page in your application, you would create a class in your automation framework that kind of represents that page. And in that page, in that class, you would have your data and you would have methods to access the data. Now, the data in the page object model design would be your elements, for example, so buttons and text and things that are on within your application. And then there would be methods as well to access that data, all right? Now, this page is pretty overwhelming as far as the content, so it could be a bit much to say, how do I encapsulate everything here? What I do is I only encapsulate or only add the methods and things for tests as I go along. So if there's a specific test that I need to automate, then I add whatever data I need for that test and whatever methods I need for that test. And anything else on the page, I just leave until later. And so that kind of simplifies things for me, and I don't feel as overwhelmed. Okay, so let's look at a test. And let's say we wanted to test the bio field on this page. So that gives us a nice, small, manageable bite that we can work with. Okay, so I would create a class called profile page. And in this class, notice I have my data here, which is the bio field. And notice it's private. And then I also have the get bio method, which is public. So I've encapsulated that data. I made it private and I provided a way to get that data, right? And so I'm maintaining control within my class. All right. So that was encapsulation, very simple, very straightforward, using the page object model design it's a lot of literature about that. So that one I think you can grasp. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I will entertain questions if anyone has anything so far. Paul, do we have questions?
Hey, we had let's see. Here's one right here. Thanks for taking a break here. I wasn't quite ready for you. If you guys are thinking about questions right now, go ahead and start typing them. This is a nice time to do it. I have one here from Nadia.
Okay.
And Nadia asks, what are the advantages of encapsulation, or what are the effects of not applying it?
Good question. So especially when we look at the simple case of like person, for example, right? So this, when I teach this to my college students, they often ask that same question because it seems like, well, it's a lot of work. Why can't I just say person.name and just talk directly with the data? The reason for that is this is a simple case, but when we look at bigger models or objects, and especially when we're working with the enterprise stuff, you want to protect this data. You don't want someone to directly change this data without taking care of everything that needs to be taken care of. Now, in this case, get name is simply returning name. But in other cases, for example, like in the page object model design, if you have a method that says set text, for example, there's more than just setting that variable that needs to be done. It actually needs to get the web driver, go out to the UI, and set that text there, right? There might be other things you need to do, like find the element. So you want to be, you meaning your class, you want to be in control of what's going on with this data. And you don't want people to directly just set it or get it without other things happening, right? So if you had a more complicated method, maybe somebody says set something, well, you need to set that field, but you also need to make database calls or do other things, right? And so you can do all of that inside the method, and you kind of control what's going on.
That's a great answer. We have a couple more here if you're still open to questions.
Yeah.
The first is from Lubos, and Lubos says, do you recommend extracting locators to separate objects? And I assume he means for page objects.
Right. I do. Let's see. I think we did that in here. This I think you mean like this bio one. So that would be my locator. And so I have that as this separate by object here. So sometimes I'll see people who will put the locators directly into, like, say if you were doing get bio, and instead of having this separate object, they might put the locator right there. I prefer to have it extracted out because I might want to use this again. For example, if I wanted to see if it was enabled or disabled or anything like that, I can make separate methods and still utilize that same locator without having to duplicate that in multiple places.
Great, great. So here's one from Sam. He says, hello, Angie.
Hi.
I noticed that you're using XPath over CSS selectors for targeting elements. Why is this your preference?
Okay, good question, Sam. I don't have a great answer for that other than XPath is what I started learning first, and so I'm kind of just biased towards it. I have nothing at all against CSS selectors, and some people prefer that. I've even heard an argument that CSS selectors are like a fraction of a second faster. I haven't really experienced that, but it's just my own personal bias. No good reason other than that's what I learned first. And I've kind of mastered XPath, and so I feel like an XPath beast. So I just do that.
That's great. We'll do one more here and then we'll get moving again. So this last one is from Farzad, and these are great questions, by the way. You guys are terrific at this. So Farzad says, when you refer to data in a class, is that synonymous with class member or property in general?
Yeah. So when I say data, I mean like property, attribute, field, all of those words are synonymous, yes.
Great. Well, that's all we got. Let's see
All
what
right.
happens next. Thank you.
Alrighty, so on to inheritance. So this is the second object-oriented concept, and it's probably one of the biggest, in my opinion, to making object-oriented processes work. And yet it's the most underutilized, I feel, especially in automation design. So inheritance is basically where you have a class that serves as like a super class, and that class can extend its behaviors and maybe even its data to subclasses, other classes, right? And so what this does is form like a parent-child relationship between the classes. And just like if you think about in the real world, just like a child inherits some traits from its parents, the same thing happens here. So anything that's not private within a superclass can be inherited by another class. Now, the reason that this is important is because sometimes you have some data that might be common across multiple classes. And what you don't want to do is duplicate that data in multiple places. So the way you can handle that is to have it in one class and then subclass that. And so you inherit what's common, and then in that new class, the subclass, you can also add what's unique about this class. So let's look at an example. So this is our person class again, remember? And this is really, it's cool, but it's generic, right? These are good fields, but depending on what kind of person you are, you might have additional attributes or features that might not necessarily be applicable to every type of person. So this one is generic, meaning every person has a name, an age, and a gender. We can make that assumption. And then if we move on to the next class, this would be a subclass, which is employee. So an employee is also a person, but it has unique attributes to this type of person, such as an employee ID, a start date, a salary, right? And so in Java, the way that you would implement this inheritance concept is by using this keyword right here, extends. So it's saying that this is a subclass called employee, and it's going to extend from this class called person. So this makes the inheritance relationship where everything that's not private in person now is also, it also belongs to this class employee. Okay. And then in here, notice we don't have to duplicate anything that's in the person class. So for free, we get all of this stuff. That is these are things that employee also has. And then all the rest of this stuff here are things that are unique to the employee class. Okay. And so notice here, this is an example of using that employee class. We can call a method called like set name, for example. And even though set name does not appear in this employee class, because it inherited from person, it still has access to that. Okay. So that's inheritance. Let's go back to our app now. And we're back on the Beaufort-Fairmont page. Look at the very top here. This is the header on Twitter. And here we have links to home, moments, notifications, messages. We have a search box, a menu, and a tweet button. Okay. Now, if we go to another page, so that was the Beaufort-Fairmont profile page. Now this is my own personal timeline page. If we go here, notice that we still have this same menu. And as I click around in the application, most of the pages had this same menu, this header menu. Okay, now what I've seen a lot of people do is they realize that this is something that's common across multiple pages, and so they will make a new class to represent that header. And in that class would be ways to click each one of these or deal with these fields. That's fine. I'm not saying that that's wrong. However, I do feel like there is a better way to do that. And it would be by utilizing the inheritance concept. So what this really is a part of the page, right? It's not, it's technically it's a separate component, but it's not a page itself. So it wouldn't make sense to make like another page class for it. You could break it out into a component, but what I'd much rather do is say, well, if this is a part of every page, let me make a page class. And in that page class, I can put everything that is common to pages, to all pages. And then I can inherit. So when I make my new pages, I can inherit from that page class. That way I already have access to all of this stuff. Okay, let me see if I have an example. Yes. So this is my page class, and I have the fields or data here. And then I have some methods here. So you can't see all of the methods, but I would have like the search and the tweet button and all of that stuff in here as well. Okay. Now, given this, I can then extend from this anytime I want to make another page. So say, for example, I have this notifications page. Now with notifications, I extend page, so I'm inheriting from page, meaning I get all of those methods for free. And even without me adding anything else to this notifications page, I still have some functionality. So if we look at this test navigate, I make a new instance of the page class. And then from that page, I can say go to notifications. That's fine because that method does exist in the page class. But this also gives me a handle to a new object called this notifications page. And with that object, I can still say go to moments. Even though go to moments does not appear in this notifications page, because I inherited from page, I still get that. So notice this is much cleaner than if I had the header broken out into another class. If I had that and I wanted to do this, I would have to instantiate yet another object, the header, or make static calls, but I would have to involve another class, as opposed to saying, you know what, if that exists on every page, no matter what page object I'm working with, I can directly access those methods. Okay. So that's like a basic example of inheritance, and a lot of people do get that part right, as far as like their base pages or base tests. So some, I've seen examples with base tests, and I do this as well. In my tests, I would make like a super class for all tests, and in there it would do the common things like open the browser and launch the application, so that I'm not repeating that. And then in my test classes, I would just inherit from that. So people seem to be on track with that, but there are additional ways that we can use inheritance within our automation design. So let's talk about that. Okay, so this is our profile page again, and it's extending from page, and again we have our little get bio method, right? So this is nice. We feel good about this. Let's look at the application again. So again, we're looking at the Beaufort Fairmont profile page. And then I can also go to my personal profile page. So that get bio method that we had in profile page, does it is it applicable for both of these pages? Why, yes, it is. I can get bio from Beaufort Fairmont, and I can also get bio from Tech Girl, me, right? However, if we look at these pages a little bit more closely, there are some differences between them. So on Beaufort Fairmont, notice because this is not my profile page, there's this tweet to Beaufort Fairmont button there. On my page, that's not there. There's also on this side this following link button. So this would be follow if I didn't follow it. And by the way, you should follow this. If I didn't follow it, it would say follow. But this whole thing is unique to other people's profiles. If I go on my own profile, notice I have a different button, which is edit profile. So that's unique to my own personal profile. I also have this tweet activity here, which doesn't appear on the other people's profile pages. So there are some differences between my profile page versus someone else's profile page. And I see sometimes where teams will try to figure out, how do I handle this? And what they'll end up doing is still using that profile page class, but adding the those other methods from the different states inside of here. I think that's a bit messy, and it's also confusing. For example, if I was doing a test and I instantiated this profile page, and I happen to be on Beaufort Fairmont's page, and I say profile page dot click edit profile button. That doesn't exist on this page, right? And so you would have to document that out, put comments to say, well, that's only available in this specific state and not that state. And it's really confusing to others who are writing the test. I like to keep this separate and clean because what I've realized is I'm never going to be the only one in a framework. Even if I am today, if I move to another team or leave that job or anything like that, or we hire more people, then I want them to be able to utilize the framework as well. So I try to make things as neat as possible. So the way I would go about doing this is to keep my profile page, but I'm going to just put the things that are common to the profile page in that class, such as that Get Bio. And then I'm going to make two more classes. One is my profile page, which will extend profile page, so I get all of that common data. And then I'm going to add what's unique to my profile page within this class. Okay, and then I can do the same thing. Also, let me tell you what we have here. So we have the edit profile button and basically a click edit profile. So that's unique to my profile page. So if I was working in my test and I use the my profile page object, I would have everything that's common to the profile pages, and I would only have access to the things that are available on my profile page. All right, and then the other class I would make is user profile page or other profile page or some nice name for this to basically indicate that it's not mine, but it's someone else's profile page. And then notice here I have the tweet to user button and a way to click that. So that's what's specific to that class. So that keeps things separated and clean, and given any object that I'm using within my test, when I click dot and I see the methods that are available, those are valid methods, and I don't have to go and read through comments to see what I can and can't use in a given state. Okay, I think that's it for inheritance. Do we have any questions, Paul?
We do, we do. So Chris asks, Angie, what do you think the best practice is for implementing a common navigation bar? I've heard both approaches, inheritance or import.
I'm guessing what you mean by import. I'm thinking you mean where you have it separated and then you would have maybe a method in your page class that gives access to that. That's fine too, but I would use like kind of a coupled approach. I would still use the inheritance. So say for example, if my header was big, like for my header on the Twitter page, there was only a couple of options there. So it was fine to put that right in the page class, but I also don't want my page object classes to be humongous. So if there was a whole bunch of data that was common across all pages and was in my page class, I would look at a way to clean it up. And so one way might be to go ahead and make a header class or a menu class. And in that header class, I would have all of the things for the header, like the navigation. And so that would be a nice chunk of code that I cleaned up out of the page class. But still, I wouldn't, from my test, I wouldn't try to instantiate header. In the page class itself, I would have a method that still says like get header and then dot this, dot that. I can still navigate from whatever page I'm in. So I can separate it out, but still provide some handle to that from the page itself. I hope that makes sense.
That's great. And we've got a bunch of questions here. We're not going to be able to get to them all in this break as I'm watching the time, and I want to make sure we get everything done here. But I do have one from Sue that I think is important. She says, so private data from the superclass is not inherited to the subclass, extending that superclass.
Exactly. So the superclass, if you have the private data in there, that's why the encapsulation piece is important. So if you make the data private, you still have method.
I think your voice just went out there. It seems like we might be having a little bit of a technical difficulty. I need some feedback. If you can hear me, if you can, there you go. Are you still there, Angie?
Yeah, I'm
There
here.
you are. Okay, go right ahead. I think we can hear you now.
Oh, they didn't hear me? Okay.
Yeah, it cut out there for a little bit, right? Maybe the last three sentences or so.
Okay, so the question was, yes, the question was if you have private data in a superclass, can the subclass not access it? And that is correct. So if you have private data, your subclass won't be able to access it, but that's why encapsulation is so important. So even if I privatize my data, if I provide methods that are public or protected, then the subclass will have access to those methods and still be able to do what it needs to do with the data, but not directly.
That's great. That's great. I have a bunch more questions here, and what I'll do is I'll save them off for after this session, and we'll make sure to get answers to each of you. Keep asking questions as we go along, and we'll try to take a break here in another few minutes on the next section with those questions. Sound good, Angie?
Yeah, that's cool.
Cool.
All right, so let's go into polymorphism. Polymorphism is basically where a object can take on different forms. It can be uh, its self, and it can also be um, its parent type class. So it's best if I describe this with an example. So let's look at this class, which is animal. And animal has a method called make sound. And it prints out like a blank string, right? And then I have a subclass called dog. And dog overrides the make sound method that it inherited from animal. And it changes that print statement to wolf. And remember, when you inherit, it also makes sense to add whatever is unique. So if you are inherited from someone, the reason you would do that is because you have additional data to add or methods, behavior to add. So I also added this fetch method in here. It says fetch is fun. And then the third class is called cat, and this extends animal, and it also overrides the make sound method and changes the print statement to meow and adds a method called scratch. Okay. And here is a zoo class, which basically is going to exercise this polymorphism. So if I look at this very first block here, if I have a dog whose name is Rocky, and I say Rocky.fetch and Rocky.makeSound, and I call this method feed, and I pass in Rocky. Here is the definition of that feed method. Notice the data type that this feed method takes. It takes an animal. However, this is a dog, and yet this still compiles and runs perfectly. So this is an example of polymorphism where this is defined as a dog, but it can also take on the shape of an animal. And inside of this feed method is also the use of this operator, which is called instance of. And so I can do things to find out, okay, you're an animal. I wanted a generic method. I didn't want to have to make a method that said take a dog, a method that said take a cat, right? So instead of that, I just said take any animal, and then I'll do the logic in here. So I use animal an instance of dog. If so, print out something about the dog, give them some dog food. And then else, if it's an instance of cat, then you can print out the cat food. So if we ran that block, then this is what would be displayed. Fetch is fun, so it got that from the dog class. Make a sound, so it made wolf. And then here is your dog food. Okay. The next block of code, I have an object Sasha. Sasha is an animal, but yet I instantiate Sasha as a dog. So this is where animal is Sasha's type, but we're instantiating it with the dog class. So if I call Sasha.makeSound, does it go to this animal make sound, or does it go to this make sound of dog? What it would do is it would go to the dog class. So even though it's of type animal, it will recognize that it's instantiated as a dog, okay? And even in here, when we look at the instance of, even though it's of type animal, it knows that it's an instance of dog. All right, here's some funny, crazy stuff. So I have Sasha, who's a dog, and I make Sasha become a cat. So this is polymorphism at its finest, right? So that same object, I now make a cat. And then when I go ahead and run that, it will now go into the cat class and print out meow, and it recognizes that it's an instance of cat. So it gives it some cat food. Now back to our automation. So we made the profile page. We had all of the common methods for a profile. And then we made two subclasses, my profile page and user profile page, both of these containing what was unique to those states, those types of profiles. And so let's say we had a utility method that said go to profile and you pass in a username. What do you return back? Do you return my profile page back, or do you return user profile page back? And this is really interesting because you don't know which one of these is going to be, but yet when you program this, you have to put the return type. It has to be a definite return type. So what I do is I use polymorphism, and I can say, you know what, just return a profile page, because my profile page is a profile page, and so is user profile page. So this will cover both cases. And then I can come in here and I can get a little bit more clever, and I can say, well, if the username that you passed in equals to what I'm logged in as, then I know when I go to this profile page, that's going to be my profile page. So I can return my profile page. Notice, even though we've defined it as we're going to return profile page, we can still return a different shape of this, a different variation. And if it's not equal to who's logged in, then I know it's someone else's profile page. So I return that. Looking at this with a test, let's say the bio test. So I'm going to test the bio on my profile. So I do instantiation of page. It doesn't matter where I am in the app, because remember, page is the superclass to all of my page classes. So I can instantiate that. That should be fine. And then I use that page to say go to profile, and I pass in TechGirl1908. And this gives me, it goes to that page and gives me a handle to the generic profile page class, right? And so, and then I have my bio listed here, and then I do my assertion where I'm saying I expect this bio to be equal to what's on my profile page that get bio. Now this is pretty straightforward because get bio does exist in the profile page. It's a common method to all different types of profiles. So that's fine. But let's look at one more test where we say we want to test tweet to user from their profile, so from someone else's profile page. How would I do that? So I would still instantiate the page and go to profile, but this time I put in the Bull Fairmont handle. And I am going to get a profile page back, but I know what I'm looking for is a user profile page. So I know it's not my profile page. And so I can cast this to user profile page and make the type user profile page. In doing this, so this is not the most favorable thing for a lot of programmers. Some people will teach against using casting. That's because it can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. And when I say dangerous, nothing's going to blow up. The program will crash with an exception, like a class cast exception. For example, let's say that I happen to be logged in as the Beaufort Fairmont account. And then I call this go to profile, and then I try to to cast this to user profile page. Well, if I'm logged in as both Fairmont, then what was actually returned was my profile page objects. And so it'll say I can't cast that into user profile page because those two have no relationship with each other, right? And so in that case, you would get an exception. So if you're going to use this type of thing, just be careful with it. You might want to put some additional checks. That's why we have like the instance of and stuff like that. So you can do that check first before you try to actually do a cast. Okay. And then I can just assert here. So here I'm asserting that this button is displayed. So that's a couple of ways that you can use polymorphism within your automation. Any questions on polymorphism?
Sure. We have a couple questions here, and I'm going to limit it to a couple of questions. We have one from Paul, and Paul said, this is not me, this is a different Paul. Paul says, how granular should one typically make page objects? For instance, single page applications have inner components that have complex and code size bulky operations that aren't relevant to other components. What point should one delimit the need to make a page object class for that area of the page?
That's a great question because right now, like just yesterday, I was working in one of the page object classes here at work. And I couldn't find stuff. Like it took me scrolling to find what I needed. And so when I get like that, I start feeling overwhelmed a bit. If I have to, in my IDE, start looking at, oh, what all methods do I have and alphabetize them and everything to try to find what I need, that's an indicator to me that this is too big. So at that point, that's a signal where I say, let me break this up some, okay? And when I go to break it up, just like you said, Paul, I start looking at what are some components in here. So I don't just arbitrarily say, let me take the first 8 methods and throw them in another class. I look at some logical way to divide those up. So if there's some grid, for example, maybe I separate that out. In that page class, like I said, if we had the header and we had a bunch of other functionality in that as well, then I can say, okay, all of this stuff that's related to header, I can put in a different page, a different class, and break it up that way. But I still give handles to those objects from the class itself if possible.
Great. I'm going to do one more question, and then we're going to move on. We have about 12 minutes left before 2, and I know that people have things to do for the rest of the day, so we'll limit this down. Here's one by Chong, and Chong asks, for page object design pattern in automation scripts in Java, when do you use an interface, and when is another time to use an abstract class? Do you have any good examples?
Yep, that's next. So give me another question.
All right. So Dot asks, could the dog cat food be by data file or case statement?
Yes. So I did a if statement here where I said instance of an instance of dog and instance of cat. Instead of doing if else, you can use whatever other control statements you want. So if you wanted to do a case, I think you should be able to do like a switch statement. Or if you wanted to use some kind of control file, I guess you could do that. It seems a bit overkill, but yeah, I think you could.
Great.
All right,
Thanks,
Paul,
Angie.
give me one more because the next section is quick.
Okay, all right. I'm going to go back a little ways. Someone asked at some point, Steven asked at some point, what is the by class? Is that specific to Java or is that Selenium?
It's a Selenium object. So the by class is basically how Selenium goes about finding its objects. So or its elements. So you say by and then you give it the locator. For example, find element by XPath or find element by ID. So it's a Selenium object.
Great. That's
All
all we
right.
got right now.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to abstraction, which is the last pillar of object-oriented programming. And abstraction basically provides like a template without implementation. So it's like a blueprint, if you will, without like the details. So kind of assists. Let's look at an example. So let's say we have this interface called product. And in this interface, notice these methods don't have bodies. They are defined with their return type and their name, and then just a semicolon. Oh, and any data they will take, but just a semicolon. So what I'm saying is, if I have any product, let this serve as a template. If you're going to make a product, you should be able to get and set the price, get and set the name, and get and set the color of that product. I don't know how you're going to do that. It's probably depending on the product it is. So I don't have the details on how to do that. I don't care how you do it, but I'm saying this should be like a contract to say, if you want to make a product, here's the template, here's the behavior that you should provide to calling classes. So if I look at this class, it actually implements this stuff. So this class is called book, and if you are trying to implement the interface, you use the keyword implements. So before we saw extends, and that was using inheritance to basically inherit the behavior in any non-private data from a class, but this is different. It's not necessarily inheriting it, it's actually providing the implementation details. So at this point, I go, and all of the methods that were in product need to be implemented in here. If for some reason there are specific methods that you don't want to implement, then instead of implementing this, well, instead of making this just a regular class, you could make it an abstract class. So the abstract class basically just means that some of the details are implemented and some are not. Some are still just defined with the semicolon, and interface means pretty much none of the details are defined. So let's look at automation. I don't use abstraction a whole lot in my frameworks, but there are some cases where I find it useful. And one of those is when I'm dealing with like widgets. So back to Paul's question about breaking things up. So sometimes there are components or widgets on the page that are better defined outside of the page object class itself. And one of those might be a widget. So this is an abstract class. The reason it's abstract is because the first method here is abstract. It has no implementation details, but yet the second method does. So this is basically saying, if you want to get items from any type of list that might be on the Twitter application, then this is probably how it should be defined. And if you're going to make some kind of list widget, you need to have a method that will allow people to get the items from it. And what you should return is the list of web elements, right? And so I don't know how you're going to get those. Maybe you're just going to do a dot find elements and get the list like that. Maybe you're going to get some parent type elements and then drill down in a for loop and get some other data from there, another sub element from there. I don't know. I don't care. All I'm saying here is, if you want to make a class that's of a type widget, a list widget, then you should provide some type of way to get them the items back. Now, this get number of items I do know more about. So I don't care how you got the items, but I do know how to count those items no matter what. And so I can provide that implementation detail right away. All right, so let's go ahead and look at an example of using this abstract class. So let's say a tweet list, for example. So when you go on Twitter and there's a list of tweets there on your profile or in your timeline, I can use this tweet list and extend from the list widget. So since it's an abstract class, I use extend as opposed to implements. Only use implements when I'm dealing with an interface. So in this list widget, I'm inheriting that abstract get items and also the get number of items. And if I don't make my tweet list class abstract, then I'm required to implement that get items method that I inherited. Okay, so I do that here at the bottom where I simply do driver.find elements, and I get all of the elements on the page that match this by statement, this locator. And so this will get me all of the tweets on the page and pass those back. Okay, so that is abstraction in a nutshell. I think we have about 5 more minutes if anyone has any more questions.
Yeah, Angie, I want to make sure to be able to do this drawing before
Oh,
people
yeah.
have to get off for whatever's next. So what I'm
Okay.
going to do is I'm going to pick one more question and then we're going to go straight to that. And this is from Hamid. He says, do you ever create intermediate workflow classes that combine several methods from a page object?
I make within the page object class itself, I make small methods, so I make it very granular. For example, let's say I was doing a login. I would have a method that sets the password field, a method that sets the username field, and a method that clicks the button. But then I would also have this intermediate kind of conjunction method that would do all 3 of those calls. So I make it granular enough so that people can do error cases if they want to. Like if I want to set the username and don't set the password and then click the button, I can do that test. But in most of my cases where I want to do the happy path, then I just have that kind of compound method that'll make the call.
That's great. Thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. I know that Twitter kind of lit up. We had a whole bunch of comments out there. Lots of great questions here. Once again, if you asked a question and we didn't get to it, I'm going to make sure that Angie and I go through those and figure out how to get you an answer.
That sounds great.
I really appreciate everybody being here. I'm going to take the presenter mode back over here. I know that one person also asked about your code. Would you be willing to make your code available?
I knew someone was going to ask that. So it's in a sloppy state. I just like wrote stuff for the snippets, but yeah, I might can work that out and make it pretty and then post it somewhere.
Somebody always asks, right? There's always one in every group.
Yeah.
So, all right, great. Well, thanks so much for being here, Angie. I really appreciate it. It's always nice to work with you on things. Angie's going to be back with us in December, right, Angie?
Yes.
Okay, December. And then in January, Boz, how do you say his last name?
I don't know.
Boz Gierjek, I'm going to try. I apologize if I got that wrong. He is a test automation guru from the Netherlands, and he's going to talk with us about service virtualization in January. Next month, on the 13th, I'll be doing a presentation. I don't know what that's on yet, so if you have something you want to talk about with test automation or want me to dive into, send me a note, paul@beaufortfairmont.com, or find me on Twitter, dpaulmerrill, or some other way. So, I don't have a drum roll, but who's going to win? All right, $50 gift certificate to Amazon.com is going to Laura H. Yay, yay! I don't have stuff for that either. So Laura, there's only one Laura on the call right now, from what I can see. So if your name is Laura and that's what you typed in, you are the winner, and I will contact you by email. I appreciate everybody being here. Once again, when you have test automation needs or you just want to talk through your test automation challenges, give me a yell. This is our corporate number. If we don't answer, leave a message and leave your contact information. Webinars, you know how to get to us. We've got blogs out there. I'm on Twitter. Ask me about office hours. This is a great way to get a little bit more experience or expertise onto your team. Myself or my other consultants can work with you over the course of a month. We do weekly check-ins, weekly office hours. And it's very affordable, a great way to add some of those experiences to your team without having to suffer through them yourself. So make sure to ask me about that. Once again, so excited to have everybody here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Angie.
Yes, thank you for having me.
This has been great, and there will be a recording available as soon as I can get it up. So everybody enjoy your afternoon on the East Coast and the very end of your morning on the West. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.